Hi, my dear listeners. Today is the 13th of November, Monday, 2023. And as usual, I am back. This is retired Lieutenant Colonel Samsudeen Sarr, former commander of the Gambian National Army, as usual, reading my book, Testimony of a Gambian Military Officer and a Diplomat. My initial plan was to bypass 6 chapters, leaping from chapter 16 directly to chapter 23, where the details of my unexpected retirement from the Gambian National Army in May 1999 were revealed. However, due to widespread interest and a specific requirement to shed light on the 1996 Farafenni armed attack by Kufang's rebels and mercenaries from Liberia, individuals who callously took the lives of 6 of our soldiers, I opted to read chapter 19 before progressing to chapter 23. Please be aware that chapter 19 is quite extensive, so your patience with the additional time required is appreciated. Chapter 19, 6 GNA soldiers killed at Farafenni barracks. In mid-July 1996, a peculiar report surfaced in the Banjul-based newspaper, The Point. It mentioned the arrest of Gambian mercenaries from Liberia in the Senegalese town of Tambacounda, allegedly with intentions to attack the Gambia. The story was brief, and at the time it didn't receive much attention within the country, and especially in the army. It was, however, expected that the National Intelligence Agency would further investigate the story to confirm its authenticity. By this point, I had been steadily gaining the trust of the Army Commander, the Ministry of Defense, and the entire government, thanks to my outstanding performance as a competent and reliable staff officer and the Deputy Army Commander. Despite my unjust incarceration at Mile 2 Central Prison from July 1994 to May 1995, it had become evident to the entire nation that I had been falsely accused and was indeed innocent. Even Vice Chairman Samate, regardless of our previous conflicts, began to appreciate my contribution to the army and the country as a whole. Yet, he persistently advocated for equal rights, influence, and authority alongside Chairman Jani, who remained patient, biding his time for the opportune moment to assert absolute control in their power-sharing arrangement. The moment was fast approaching, promising to unfold in a very dramatic fashion. Samate went as far as promoting his younger brother, Second Lieutenant Pate Samate, above his peers to the rank of captain and appointing him as the overall commander of the Army Training School. Captain Pate Samate and I developed a very good working relationship, although I couldn't ignore the fact that he had been involved in the murder of the former finance minister, Ousseynou Kama Cissé, in June 1995. It was obvious that Minister Cissé had been lured to Captain Yankuba Traore's house and brutally murdered, with Pate Samate's active participation, and to make it appear as though the minister had died in an accident in his official car. In August, Vice Chairman Samate selected me to accompany him on an official trip to Libya. The purpose of the trip was to collect $32 million, which was reported to be a subvention from Colonel Muammar Gaddafi to Chairman Chade. The delegation consisted of the governor of the Central Bank of the Gambia, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Defense, Mr. G.O. Silla, Silla's Deputy, Mr. Kani, Samate's Protocol Officer, Mr. Jao, Mr. Baba Jai, an individual who had studied in Libya and now held, among other special duties in the country, the role of liaison officer between the Libyan government and the Gambia government. Additionally, there were a couple of bodyguards who accompanied us. I think it's worth noting that Mr. G.O. Silla had served as the Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Defense during the PPP era until the time of the coup. After Mr. Saul Mam Jangha's dismissal, his former boss, he subsequently got appointed Permanent Secretary by the military government. Remarkably, he managed to navigate all change of government, surviving the PPP, the AFPRC, APRC, and even the current NPP government. As of 2023, he had become an ambassador for the NPP government in an Arab country, embodying the resilience characteristic of most Gambian technocrats. When we arrived in Libya, the government transported us to a city called Sirte, where a team of Libyan technocrats awaited us to discuss the matter of the $32 million. To our surprise, they view it not as a subvention but as a loan, prompting the need for detailed negotiations regarding its terms and conditions of disbursement and repayment. Vice Chairman Samate firmly clarified to the Libyan technocrats that he was not there to secure a subvention, not to negotiate a loan. Consequently, he declined to convene at the designated meeting hall, refused to attend the officially prepared lunch, and opted to return to Tripoli promptly. It was a ride by car, and we arrived at Tripoli late at night without any meeting with the Libyan negotiators of any funds. Throughout this ordeal, Samate maintained constant communication with Chairman Jane at the State House in Banjul, who endorsed every decision made by his vice chairman. The following morning, another group of Arab officials arrived at the hotel to escort Samate to a meeting with Colonel Muammar Gaddafi staying within the city. He departed in the company of the central bank governor, Mr. G.O. Silla, and Mr. Baba Njai. Meanwhile, I remained at the hotel with his protocol officer, the deputy permanent secretary, and the two guards. Upon their return later in the day, the vice chairman shared with us a $2 million check he had received as a gift from Gaddafi to the Gambia government. Although it fell short of the expected amount, it served as a face-saving gesture, making the trip somewhat worthwhile. Chairman Janet directed the funds to the army for welfare and maintenance, which pleased Vice Chairman Samate. In late October 1996, Vice Chairman Samate once again enlisted my participation in another official delegation bound for North Korea. The delegation closely resembled the one that had traveled to Libya in August, except for the absence of Central Bank Governor and the Libyan-Gambian liaison officer, Mr. Baba Njai. Regrettably, our journey to Korea did not yield the desired results. The primary objective was to negotiate with the Kim Jong-il government to construct a light weapons manufacturing industry in the Gambia for export in exchange for fishing rights in our rivers for mutually agreed upon period. Unfortunately, we were unable to meet with the head of state, Kim Jong-il. We were informed that he was in mourning for his late father, Kim Il-sung, which had persisted for an entire year, preventing him from meeting with foreigners during this period. I had wondered who had arranged such a long and arduous journey that took us from France to China and ultimately to North Korea without any prior knowledge of the nation's mourning situation. The expedition involved 3 days of continuous flying as we hopped from one aircraft to another. They actually informed us that they were not interested in any fishing in any part of Africa. But they would readily construct the industry if the Gambia government could come up with the right price, and most importantly, in foreign currency, preferably in dollars. The isolated country with no foreign radio and television signals was facing a severe drought at the time, with a very hungry population struggling to survive on very meager supplies of food. During our 2 days in North Korea, we visited old revolutionary military leaders, historical sites like the birthplace of their great deceased leader, Kim Il-sung. One of the most remarkable places we visited was a massive building in the center of the capital city, Pyongyang, where the remains of Kim Il-sung, dressed in a black suit, were exhibited in a glass box for public viewing every day since his death. The final program featured an entertainment performance at the National Theatre by young and acrobatic dancers, mainly young girls, accompanied by outstanding Korean musicians. Before departing, we negotiated for technical assistance in the form of martial arts experts to train the Gambia National Army soldiers in close combat fighting. This was approved on condition that the Gambia government will provide the men with food, shelter, transportation, medical coverage, utilities, and reasonable allowances while in the country. A 4-man karate team later arrived to train a significant number of Gambia National Army soldiers in martial arts. We departed North Korea via Moscow on Thursday, November 7, 1996, and arrived in Brussels on the same day. While waiting for our flight at Brussels airport to Banjul, Vice Chairman Samate received a telephone call from the National Intelligence Agency headquarters in Banjul, as the NIA, reporting an armed attack at Farafenni Barracks by a group of newly released security detainees from Mile 2 prison, including Lieutenant Moro Mendy, the former adjutant at Yundum Barracks. The report came from Henry Sambo, an NIA senior officer notorious for fabricating lies or reports he had no clue of their origin, just to put people in trouble. Samate was visibly enraged, complaining about why the detainees were released in his absence and why Lieutenant Moro Mendy in particular had been released. I was originally seated in economy class of the aircraft, but Samate arranged for me to be transferred to the first-class cabin during our flight from Brussels to Banjul, where we discussed the situation throughout the flight to Dakar, Senegal. He was genuinely concerned when Henry Sambo informed him that his brother, Captain Pate Samate, had led a company to confront the attackers at Farafenni Barracks. He hoped that Moro Mendy would be captured and held until he arrived. However, when we landed at Dakar airport for refueling, Agent Henry Sambu called again with a slightly altered story. The attackers were revealed to be Gambian mercenaries from Liberia, and the attack had no connection to the newly released detainees. 6 soldiers lost their lives and 2 attackers were apprehended. The 2 captured individuals were being interrogated at the NIA headquarters in Banjul. Of the seven attackers in total, 5 had managed to escape across the border into northern Senegal. We touched down at Yundum International Airport around 6-7 p.m. and waited until the morning of 8 November to report our North Korea trip to Jane and to discuss the Farafenni-Kam attack. After Vice Chairman Samate briefed Chairman Jane about our journey, the latter provided little additional information about this attack. We already knew that 2 of the attackers were in custody and being interrogated at the NIA, while the others had fled to Senegal. Later in the afternoon, I made the effort to visit the Banjul mortuary to identify the 6 soldiers who had been killed by the attackers. Among them were a surgeon, a corporal, and 4 private soldiers, all of whom had been shot and killed with AK-47 rifles. According to Muslim tradition, their family members wanted them to be buried that day. Witnesses to the incident at Farafenni Barracks described how the attackers had taken the soldiers on sentry duty by surprise at dawn, overpowered them, seized their weapons, and began shooting at anyone who moved in dark. Fortunately, 2 of the attackers were also wounded by friendly fire, causing chaos and disarray. One of the attackers, who happened to be their spiritual guide, vanished during the chaos. One of the 2 wounded rebels, Saul Cham, left the camp in search of medical assistance and managed to cross the border to Kaolack, Senegal, where he was admitted for treatment at a local hospital. The other injured attacker, Bala Kinte, attempted to seek treatment at the AFPRC-built Farafenni Hospital, but his presence raised suspicions among some patients, who promptly tipped off the police, resulting in his swift arrest. The remaining 6 attackers in the barracks decided to wait until daybreak before attempting to recruit the local youth to join them in their mission to overthrow the AFPRC government, a modus operandi reminiscent of their actions during the Liberian Civil War while fighting for Charles Taylor. To their dismay, they found no supporters for their cause. At around 10 a.m., they loaded nearly every available weapon from the camp's armory into a pickup truck, detained the battalion commander, Captain Barham Sein, and coerced him into accompanying them on their journey towards Bara via the North Bank Division Highway. Midway on their journey, they encountered Captain Pate Samate's troops, who opened fire on them. Surprisingly, instead of retaliating or engaging in a firefight, they scattered into the nearby bushes and fled north towards Senegal. One of them, the most dangerous among them, later confessed to killing almost all the soldiers at the barracks because they failed to stop running when he ordered them to. He lost his way, wandering through the bush the entire day before eventually growing exhausted and settling beneath a tree for a rest, only to fall into a deep slumber. Local villagers discovered Haja Dabo fast asleep under the shade of the tree, his rifle by his side, and subsequently arrested him. They handed him over to the nearest police station, leading to his transportation to Banjul's NIA headquarters, where he reunited with his wounded and captured colleague, Bala Kinte. The NIA, in their initial intelligence assessment, concluded that the attackers were sponsored by the Senegalese government with the intent to overthrow the AFPRC government. I, personally, remained unconvinced by the NIA's findings, expecting a more substantiated report to emerge sooner rather than later. The situation was far too serious to rely on unsubstantiated stories that had the potential to destabilize the entire country. The Director General Bamba Baji presented their findings to Chairman Jane, who subsequently passed them on to his deputy and the Minister of Defense, Captain Edmond Samate. That very evening, Edmond gave the order that the Gambia National Army infantry will cross to Bara on the next day, the 9th of November, with sufficient number of troops to launch a surprise attack on the Senegalese town of Kaolack. Colonel Bakari Jara contacted me to relay Edmond Samate's inconceivable order about the operation, which I promptly promised to disobey. Early on Saturday morning, Major Bah and I visited the NIA headquarters to understand how they had arrived at such a drastic conclusion, suggesting that the Senegalese government had sponsored the rebels. Regrettably, we discovered one of the captured attackers, Haja Dabo, being brutally maltreated while the other Kinte, who had been shot and wounded, sat on the floor watching. "Why are you maltreating the captive?" I asked Landing Kuje, the NIA officer in charge. "Because she is not telling the truth, sir," he replied. "But Landing, what is the truth?" I inquired further. He explained that Kinte had been more forthcoming with information than Dabo, and they wanted him to change his story to match that of his partner. Incidentally, Haja Dabo had consistently maintained since his capture the previous day that the Senegalese government had no knowledge of the attack. I was so angered by Kinte's behavior and lies that I was on the verge of physically confronting him, but Major Barr restrained me. It had become clear that Dabo was the one telling the truth and Kinte the dishonest one. Despite all the punishment he endured throughout the night, Dabo remained steadfast in his story. We immediately put an end to the maltreatment of the captured rebel and took our time to interrogate him. He later convinced me that their decision to attack the barracks was entirely their own and had nothing to do with the Senegalese government. He went on to explain how the idea of overthrowing the AFPRC government by attacking the Gambia had been conceived in Liberia, along with their leader, Kufang. Some of them had reservations, given that their original plan to overthrow the PPP government was no longer valid after President Jawla was ousted by the Gambian military. However, Kufang had convinced some of them that the Senegalese government will sponsor their operations once they gathered in Senegal. So 15 of them eventually left Liberia, for Senegal, where they were received and accommodated in 2 towns, Sokone and Tambacounda. 7 of them rented a place in Sokone, while the remaining 8 live in Tambacounda. A Senegalese general named General Abubakar One was responsible for their sustenance and accommodation, which they received at his office every month. Kufang regularly visited them, but they began to grow impatient due to the prolonged wait. In July, Kufang advised the Tambacounda group to approach the main military barracks in the town to inquire about purchasing weapons. The surgeon they contacted facilitated a meeting with the barracks commander. However, upon their arrival, Senegalese soldiers arrested all of them and handed them over to the police. In the same week, Kufang revealed, hold on 1 second. In the same week, Kufang revealed his intention to return to Liberia to procure arms from Charles Taylor, who had promised him enough weapons for the operation to overthrow the APRC government. When asked about those arrested in Tambacounda, Kufang assured them that he will secure their release upon his imminent return. He left them with a telephone number to reach him in Liberia whenever they needed him. But when they tried the number a few weeks later, it showed that it didn't exist. This revelation prompted the 7 rebels to expel Kufang as their leader and appoint Ablaye Sane as their new leader. With Kufang out of the picture, the Senegalese general stopped providing them with the allowances for their feeding and basic needs, forcing them to consider launching the armed attack on their own. In the lead up to the attack, they frequently visited the Farafenni barracks, engaging in activities like playing volleyball with the soldiers, enjoying attire sessions, and even receiving cash from the soldiers before returning to Sokone. This was all part of their reconnaissance efforts, aimed at understanding the barracks, its activities, the number of soldiers stationed there, key locations to be targeted, and most importantly, the location of the armory. To secure weapons, Kinte volunteered to return to his family in Soma, in the Gambia, after being missing for over 10 years. Upon his arrival, there was a tearful celebration as everyone had believed he was long dead. Kinte deceived them, claiming that he had been in Europe importing and exporting used vehicles. He said there were vehicles he bought and were currently at the port of Dakar, and that he needed money to clear them for commercial use to support the family. His father, in an act of trust and desperation, sold their only bull, providing him with the money they needed. Little did they know that their son was a vicious rebel who had spent all those years in Liberia involved in fighting and the killing of innocent civilians, including helpless women and children. Kinte left and paid a local blacksmith in Farafenni to manufacture 2 locally made guns that they will use for their surprise attack on the barracks. However, Kinte was not entirely honest with the national intelligence. He tailored his statement to tell them what they wanted to hear in an attempt to deceive the authorities and potentially manipulate them into making a strategic error. Similar to what Samate had advocated for an attack on Senegal. In the end, Major Ba and I wrapped up our interrogation with the rebel. Commander Jara called me and requested my presence at the Army headquarters. Once there, he informed me that the NIA Director General had reported me to Chairman Jane, alleging that I was a Senegalese spy. And Chairman Jame instructed us to meet him at the State House immediately. During our meeting at the State House, Chairman Jane asked me to explain why I was disputing the NIA's intelligence report, which pointed to Senegal's involvement in the attack. I explained to him what I gathered from Dabo, the honest rebel, and how his partner was lying, underscoring the amateur way the attack was conducted and the primitive weapons they used. I emphasized that if Senegal were to sponsor rebels for such a serious operation, It should be done better with a 95% success probability. Moreover, I didn't believe it was a wise idea to attack Kaula, as his vice chairman and Minister of Defense had ordered us to prepare for. At that moment, to everyone's surprise, Chairman Jani endorsed Haja's version as the truth. He retrieved a file from his desk drawer and explained how the origin of the entire attack was documented in the file. Do you recall General Wan's visit? From early January to July, he asked Commander Jara, who nodded in recollection. General Wan used to visit me on a mission to secure a pardon for Kufang and facilitate his return home, he elaborated. It was obvious that Chairman Jani had always been sympathetic to Kufang's legacy and had frequently criticized the Senegalese government of Abdou Diouf for thwarting the success of the 1981 coup, resulting in the death of numerous innocent Gambians whose mass graves still line the Banjul highway. To prevent Chairman Jani's continuous attack on their president, the Senegalese government reached out to Kufang, who was residing somewhere in Africa, offering him a possible amnesty from Jani and the chance to return to the Gambia in peace. Up to that point, Kufang had been a fugitive, wanted by both the Senegalese and Gambians for orchestrating the bloody 1981 coup, which claimed the lives of several Senegalese soldiers and countless Gambian civilians, most of whom were buried in mass graves. However, when the negotiation commenced and Kufang invited to Senegal, he brought along his colleagues, whom he claimed were members of his political party because he had the ambition to continue his political career and even contest the 1996 presidential election in the Gambia. General Wan will shuttle back and forth in a private jet to meet with Jani alone and will leave without anyone knowing the details of their discussions. But when General Wan informed Chairman Jani about Kufang's political intentions, he outrightly opposed the proposal. Unbeknownst to them, to the Senegalese, the men accompanying Kufang were nothing but seasoned rebel fighters or mercenaries who were well prepared for an armed attack on the Gambia. In July 1996, the rebels, feeling desperate and on Kufang's advice, attempted to acquire weapons from a Tambacounda military camp, a foolish move that ultimately brought their mischievous plans to General Wan's attention. Kufang and his comrades were swiftly apprehended in Tambacounda. The incident was initially reported by the Banjul-based Point newspaper, which simply stated that Gambian mercenaries from Liberia had been detained in the Senegalese town of Tambacounda. However, the report did not delve into the reasons behind their arrest or provide details about their identities. Excuse me. When the Senegalese authorities warned Jani about Kufang's malicious intentions and offered to hand him over to the Gambian authorities, together with the 8 arrested rebels, he rejected the offer and sternly warned the Senegalese government against allowing them to use Senegalese territory as a launching point to attack on his country. The Senegalese, unable to hold Kufang in custody, decided to expel him, but kept his 8 comrades detained in prison. Who had knowledge of this, sir? I asked. Jani. The NIA director, Mr. Bajin, knows. The Interior Minister, Captain Baja, and the Minister of Lands, Captain Tarawale, he said. I asked what advice those men had offered at the time regarding the report And the chairman revealed that they had all dismissed it as a fabricated Senegalese tale. But he failed to inform them about the origin of the story and the part played by the Senegalese government, and especially General One. Did Vice Chairman Samate know about all this? I asked. He responded in the negative. He promptly took the file to Samate's office, explaining to him why launching an attack on Senegal will be an ill-conceived idea and an unwarranted provocation. He was initially taken aback but eventually abandoned the idea of a military incursion into Senegal. The following day, the Senegalese government arrested 3 of the escaped rebels and handed them over to Ross. Cham was apprehended at his treatment center in Kaolack, while Bande and a Senegalese national and Camara were picked up in Dhaka. I doubted that Jane was seriously considering a military adventure targeting Kaolack, which he knew would lead to the downfall of his regime much sooner than he could imagine. He was relieved that Samate had reconsidered and abandoned his previous intention. That ends chapter 19. Folks, till next time, you guys have a nice day.